Hello everybody, I'm Nicholas Armstrong-Smith and good evening and welcome to our discussion on the evolving landscape of the property market and the eastern suburbs in particular. I'm Nicholas Armstrong-Smith, your MC for tonight's panel and also the Director and Licensee in charge of Century 21 in Bondi Junction. Together with my beautiful wife Shona, we established our agency in 2012 and the business has been in Bondi Junction for 40 years. So it's a legacy that we are continuing. We've won a lot of awards. We've been in awards in this room, Bondi Chamber of Commerce, and we've won Century 21 awards, Centurion Awards. It's been a tremendous a ride for the last 12 years, but it's been really good being involved in the community, which is the most important thing. It is with this level of specialised knowledge and expertise that we wanted to come together with our deep sense of commitment to the community and ongoing education to have a property panel Q&A to delve into key issues affecting their property market when a lot of people are feeling uncertainties and wanting reassurance and boosting confidence. Our panel are very excited tonight to have an informative discussion around interest rates and mortgages, investment strategies, sales and rental know-how, as well as the impact of the media politics when it comes to public perception about real estate. We hope to provide you with insights that will aid your understanding and decision-making in this dynamic market. Alongside myself, we have a distinguished group of experts in the field of real estate and media. Let me introduce them. So next to Shona is Charles Tarby. He's the owner and chairman of Century 21 Australasia and a renowned property market expert. Charles began his career in real estate over 50 years ago, eventually founding Combined Real Estate before taking over the Australasian arm of Century 21 in 1995. My dad and I had the privilege of meeting Charles about 12 years ago when we went for lunch with him after we'd seen all the different franchises, and we had a really good relationship with Charles from day one, and Dad said, let's do business with him. And so here we are today, these 12 years on. He's created an incredible business by 8,000 managements with Wentworth Partners and created one of the biggest real estate brands in Australasia, in Century 21, Australia, New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. Clive Matheson, he's a partner at Cato & Clive. Clive is an acclaimed business and government advisor with a rich background in journalism, including the business and property sectors, having served at the senior levels of media, state and federal politics. After 10 years as business editor and editor at The Australian, Clive served as senior advisor and cabinet director to New South Wales Premiers Mike Baird and Gladys, then becoming Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, providing high-level advice, policy and political issues. Clive brings a unique perspective on strategy and communications in the property sector. Shona Armstrong-Smith, my beautiful wife, Director and Head of Property Management at our office, Century 21 Armstrong-Smith. Shona is an experienced award-winning property manager known for her expertise, professionalism and exceptional communication and customer service in the real estate sector. Her leadership has propelled her agency to the forefront of the property management sector, providing mentorship and outstanding service, allowing us to grow our agency each and every year. We hope you'll find our Q&A informative and on point and welcome you to ask questions afterwards. Following this is a major component of this evening, allowing us to give back to our community, which is very important for us. Hopefully you've all picked up the auction catalogue by now to see the fantastic selection of items on offer, with all proceeds going to Ways Youth and Family, run by CEO Terry Said, who's here tonight. Ways is a wonderful local charity which does wonders for young people in need, providing support and advice, helping them stay in school and establish careers, acquire life skills and have a successful future. After the auction, please join us for more drinks and nibbles and a chance to network with our panellists and fellow attendees. Now I'd like to first introduce you to Clive Matheson to kickstart tonight's discussion. Thank you, Clive.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you, Nicholas, for that introduction. As Nicholas mentioned, we'll have a panel discussion between all of us here on the panel. I'll hog the microphone for little bits and pieces to talk about politics and the media, but I'll leave the property to the experts. And at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. And it will just be a show of hands, and I'll sort of direct the question to the right person or just ask whoever you want. As I was preparing for today, I was looking for a really nice, pithy way of describing the current state of the property market in Australia. And then I got an invitation to the Australian Financial Review's Property Summit, bounced into my inbox, and I'm going to just borrow shamelessly from that invitation because I think it sums it up pretty well. This year was supposed to be the one in which the property sector finally experienced relief from high interest rates. It hasn't worked out that way, with rates remaining on hold last week, but the implications of the higher for longer world seem to be hitting differently across the sector. Despite higher interest rates and mortgage stress, house prices and rents continue to rise. In commercial property, the value of office towers has been significantly downgraded, yet shopping malls are in decent shape even though cost of living has worsened for their shoppers. Industrial property is downright thriving, as is the once niche alternative sector, purpose-built rental housing, data centres and healthcare assets, along with pubs and rural property. So Charles, in a nutshell, what on earth is going on?
Thank you, Clive. I have no idea. People always ask you, how's the market? And if we all knew as real estate agents, we would have bought everything before we presented it to you. Now, look, the reality is that the marketplace is this is 52 years in real estate, as Nicholas mentioned, and it's been interesting watching the change. And I don't have a concern about where the marketplace is because I've seen so many different cycles over the years, as some of you seasoned investors would have seen. And you would have been part of the 18% interest rates at one stage back in the 70s, 80s, and people are complaining about 5 and 5.75%. And so when I bought my home, in which I still live in 40 years later up in the Blue Mountains, I paid $205,000 for it, ladies and gentlemen. My interest payments then would have been $30,000 a year. Today they would be $11,000. So it's really interesting to see the changes that we're going through. And although there's a lot of talk about what's happening and what can go wrong, when you've been through those cycles, you have a closer look at it. Our economy and our RBA are far more structured than they were all those years ago. And so the concept of what you hear today, and this is one of the things that I was mentioning to Clive. How long have I got, Clive?
Keep going.
Yeah, sure. One of the things I was mentioning to Clive earlier about the marketplace is the hysteria that goes on, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But a lot of the banks, a lot of the organisations that predict the market changes do so with mostly historical data. And that's one of the biggest issues. So if you listen to what's happening out there in the press and you don't make a decision to buy or to sell, you're probably making a big mistake. And I had a person who was a senior person in one of the banks who decided not to buy. If you'll remember back just about 3 years ago, two of the banks predicted that the market was going to drop significantly. So they decided to wait. But the marketplace increased significantly over the same period of time. So going back to my point, we operate the coalface. So my organisation operates on a platform that's internal, that's part of my company, and I can see in real time a salesperson's performance in Wanaka in the South Island of New Zealand if I want to right now on my phone, meaning that we see what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and that front that we see is always very, very different to what is being predicted out there. And so the marketplace at this point in time is still a buyer and seller, which is great. A buyer and seller can negotiate in this marketplace. Whereas a year ago, the buyers were just having to throw money left, right and centre at auctioneers. We have a senior auctioneer here today and he would second that. So now, as an auctioneer myself, you have to work for every transaction to occur. People want to buy, but they can't. There's a lot of people who would wish to get out of the rent cycle, but they can't. There's a lot of people who want to sell, but there's nothing for them to buy. So although the market is odd and strange and appearing to have stalled, property prices are still increasing as we speak right now. So it's one of the most interesting marketplaces I've seen to date.
So, Charles, now I've turned it off and back on again. It'll work enough. Charles, are the high interest rates, are they having any impact at all on this market that you can see?
They are having the impact that we needed, actually, Clive, because what was happening was that the rates were actually getting too low, and I was concerned about it. Each week I was on Sky Business doing a real estate show for 10 years and I kept the records all the way through of all the auctions, interest rate movement and so on. And you were able to see that as those rates started to decline, people were getting far too interested in property. And when there's far too much interest in property, that's when you get that cycle we talk about. We talk about only two types of markets in real estate, Clive. That is one where we get a buyer up to meet what they think is a vendor's ridiculously high price, and that's called a boom. And the other where we get the seller down to meet what they think is the purchaser's ridiculously low offer, and that's called real estate. And that's what we're in 90% of the time. So if people start working that way and thinking that way, they'll be able to negotiate a transaction a lot better than what people might normally think. So the interest rates do have an impact, but buying and selling still occurs whether it's high or low.
Thanks, Charles. Can we just drill down, Nicholas, to this particular market, to Sydney and to the eastern suburbs? What are you seeing in this particular market, particularly, say, in residential?
So we've seen in the last few months the market to be fairly buoyant. So in about September last year, the press started saying that it was likely that interest rates wouldn't increase again. The press was on our side, and we haven't had any interest rate rises since. We've seen that, and also a lot of people move into Australia, so about 500,000 new recruits into Australia. And this is a very popular area where people want to live here, so they're moving here. So we've seen quite a lot of confidence in the market with low supply and not a lot of transactions, but low supply and properties selling pretty well, especially houses.
We talked about, a lot of people still see the market as quite unaffordable, and you and I had a chat earlier in this week. Can you just talk about some of the novel ways that you're seeing at the moment of people who are getting into the market, particularly the investment market?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen a few, Shona and I saw one last week actually, where 4 friends had got together to buy a block of units in Bondi. And so 4 friends liked each other, got together and bought a property. We've seen a lot of, the bank of mum and dad helping out purchase properties. But we've also seen, people buying a property where they maybe don't want to live and renting it out, and then renting where they do want to live, just to stay in an area where they want to be in the eastern suburbs.
And Charles, is that a trend you're seeing elsewhere as well?
I'm sorry?
The trend of people getting together?
It's an interesting thing for those of you that have a new Australian background, where your parents might have come into this country in the 40s, 50s and 60s. They always all got together and bought property, whereas individually they couldn't. And it was a big thing, and that's why you see a lot of family that have a significant amount of property. Right now in other parts of the country, not so much, because the affordability is still there. If you're in Perth or Adelaide, or Melbourne for that matter, the affordability is still there. So mum and dad might be helping in part, but mostly they're still individual. Of course, the property prices here surged 32% during the boom. They dropped back 17% during COVID, but the eastern suburbs has a 6.8% growth at this point in time annually, whereas across the country it's only 6.1%. So here is still the safe buy.
I think we'll circle back to sort of projections of where we think the market might be going. But if I could just turn to sort of politics just for a moment and maybe hog the microphone just briefly, bring a little bit of my political background and some of the considerations we had when I was in state and federal politics. You're obviously always worried about what the voters think. And back when I was at the Australian, we used to run news poll, and every quarter you'd ask people what their biggest issue was, what the most important things in their life were. Health and education are usually somewhere near the top. Taxes are usually somewhere near the top. Your personal income. It moves around a little bit. Obviously, health during COVID was number one in all those news polls. National security in the early 2000s was big, and climate occasionally peaks up. Like that summer of 2019, 2020. Right now, I can tell you, in the federal government and in the state government, despite what you might read in the media, housing affordability is their number one issue. And if you look at the New South Wales budget paper last week, the press release they put out said, housing affordability and availability is the biggest single pressure facing the people of New South Wales. Now, what a government has to do in that situation is not actually try and fix it, they have to be seen to be trying to fix it, so that they're seen to be at least making an effort. even though they know they really can't do much about it. Governments can only sort of tinker at the edges when it comes to housing. You know, they can do first homeowners grants, they can release more state land, they can build more social housing. But the big levers, you know, interest rates and immigration, a little bit more control over at the federal level. They can't really control the market, but they have to be seen to be trying to do something about it so they can win your votes at the next election. Charles, I'll start with you. You know, can efforts by state and federal governments actually have any real impact on the housing market, particularly at the moment?
Do you want me to answer this honestly? Okay, because you were very, very careful with your words before. It's fantastic. I worry about government in many respects because most of the people in government, particularly now, have never had any real business experience, but they make decisions that are very huge with the dollars that we have. When they threw the $11.3 billion that they were going to push towards housing and they were going to build so many homes, I just sat there and divided one into the other. And I thought to myself, how are they going to build a home with a piece of land or collective piece of land for $97,600? Because that's what the number comes out at. And they keep publicising this number, but the press are not picking up on it. The other issue is back in 2010, when we started this discussion, we were pushing the fact that 200,000 homes were needed to be built by 2020, otherwise there would have been a shortage. So this goes back to respective governments, and as you've said, the biggest issue is most time the governments get into power, they spend most of their time trying to stay in power, and so collectively they'll say a whole lot of things, and that's every government, it's not just the Labor government. So we are still so far behind today. Yes, it was flagged 13, 14, 15 years ago that something had to be done, and here we are in the worst position we've ever been in. So if they're going to throw $11.3 billion and build 1.7 million homes over a period of 5 years, good luck. I've just built 8 houses down at Kangaroo Valley. They laid the first slabs in 2022, November 2022, and I got the keys to these 8 properties just a few weeks ago.
One of the interesting developments I've seen in the last little while is normally most of the media and political coverage is about homeowners and mortgagees in particular. There has been a swing to concern about rentals and rental prices and the rental experience that I haven't actually seen. And Shona will talk a bit more about, you know, sort of investment and the rental experience and for landlords in particular in a moment. But the New South Wales budget actually had a couple of measures for renters. Do you think that will have any impact, particularly, you know, on the market?
Sure. I mean,
Push the button.
I did push the button.
Oh.
That's what.
We have a matrimonial dispute. I'm sitting in the middle.
So they developed the New South Wales Rental Task Force, which is meant to help with the availability and affordability.
Is that working? Can you hear, or is that? No. Grab that.
Be a bit higher.
Okay. So, I was saying they developed the New South Wales Rental Task Force, which is meant to help with the availability and the affordability of places, and they've also come up with things like investing more money in community and social housing, and also build-to-rent schemes. So hopefully there's going to be more, I guess, properties in the rental pool, and they're recognising that renters are an important factor in the housing, in the housing scheme for once,
But will that, I mean, in your view, will that actually have an impact on the market, or a bit like Charles said, we're talking such long-term things that it's not something that's going to happen straight away, and particularly not in this market here?
That will obviously take a while that would obviously take a while to come through and be in place. But they are working on things.
There'll be a whole lot of new people in Australia by then as well. So
more people
well,
coming.
Talking about new people in Australia, I mean, one of the things that they're introducing, particularly for the universities, that if you have foreign students, then you must have accommodation for them. That must be investment opportunities. You've got a rather large university just around the corner with a lot of foreign students.
So that will be good for, I guess, people who are investing, because they'll be able to invest in the buildings that are going up around universities. So private landlords will be able to definitely make money that way by investing in more accommodation, and that also means that I guess other areas, other rental areas will be will be freed up for other people because the students will be in the newly developed buildings and things like that.
Sorry about this, backwards and forwards, everyone. Can I just turn to the media for a bit? And you touched on it, Charles. The media using outdated information, not perhaps like politicians not running businesses. Not many journalists have run businesses, or certainly worked in the property industry. Overall, is the media helping or is it hindering this housing affordability issue? And is it a net positive or a net negative for the property market in general?
Do you mind if I tell a little story first about the press?
Does it involve me?
No, you're fine. It's just the confusion that you're talking about in that sense. I was invited when I was in Port Moresby visiting the Century 21 office there many, many years ago. It was my first lesson in public relations. And I was asked to speak at the Chamber of Commerce Businessmen's Club for PNG while I was there. But I was also asked by a reporter if I would take a colour photograph like Paul Keating did with the headrest that they could put in the Saturday colour section. So I got a beautiful photograph of the office and from the balcony of the hotel, and there were 70 people out the front of the office, and they were all in gold jackets, like that was our thing, and it looked magnificent. So I got that photograph, and then as I was starting my talk for the Papua New Guinea Businessmen's Club Chamber of Commerce, they introduced me, and all of a sudden all these people came running around me with spears, axes, flowers, breasts hanging out. It was the Suk Suk native dancers, and it's really good luck if they come out and do something for you, a ceremony. So, of course, a photograph was taken of me with the gold jacket standing with the Suk Suk native dancers. Both photographs were sent to the Australian newspaper. And not so much was it that my photograph with spears and axes and breasts and that hanging out was bad enough, was that the caption at the bottom said, pictured is Mr Tarby with his sales team from Port Moresby. So if we go back to that press question, the biggest issue is that, again, they don't see it. I brought my phone here with me for a reason tonight. A gentleman that I've known for 40 plus years is one of Australia's major builders, a brand you would all know. So I won't tell you which brand it is. But he has been operating for 45 years, building homes for this nation. And I sent him an email a couple of days about a client of mine that wanted a bit more information on what things were like. And this is what he wrote back to me. This happened today. And this is what you don't see in the press. So he said, this has been the worst 45 years that I've been in this industry. Massive government stimulation to the building industry brought about by the COVID-19 epidemic. So he's saying that stimulation was a bad thing because so many people started to go out and sign contracts, and many of the builders signed fixed contracts, which they cannot acknowledge. They were slow in their building process, so the money that was offered to a lot of these people when time came had expired. So that was one thing. Lengthy supply chain issues caused primarily by COVID-19 lockdown. Trade shortages, including the supervision and area managers, site area managers. During all of this, the most prolonged wet weather period of many decades, dramatic price increases from all of our trades and suppliers, none of which we chose to pass on to our customers, unlike other builders. Now you imagine, now I know he's substantial because of how long he's been there, but can you imagine this government trying to build all the homes they're talking about? But you don't hear about those sorts of stories in the press. And that's my major concern, is that the reporting is not as accurate as it should be. It's a story, and it's a story that they think will sell. Sorry. I know you.
No, I'm out of the press.
You are,
so
okay.
Nicholas, do you agree? Do you think the media, so you obviously have a lot of mainly around advertising, I suspect, rather than the editorial side. But, sort of can they help this housing affordability issue? Can they be part of the solution? Or a bit like the politicians, are they just making it look like they're trying to do something?
Currently, all of the negative stories are positive. So, for instance, when you talk about the fact that the rents are so high and it's so crazy and all these tenants are suffering, investors are going, great, I'll put the rent up. So all of their negative stories are actually positive for people in the property market, those that are in there. Those that are not are sitting back waiting for something to happen. So they do have a major impact, but right now the impact they have, the negative stories they have, are actually positive for property owners.
Yeah. Nicholas, your views on
Yeah,
that?
it can be both. It can be both good. When they're writing, they can exasperate and alleviate the housing affordability program. So it can be good and bad. Yeah.
All right, hang on to the microphone. Let's get into the real stuff, buying and selling. Nicholas, are there opportunities now to be buying in the eastern suburbs, or is it a better time to be selling? What's the house view?
Yeah, it's interesting at the moment. So, I mean, we're saying, I always say to clients, should I buy now or should I wait? And I always say you buy when you can get the finance, when you find a property that's suitable for you. Don't wait. Over my time selling property in Sydney, over 21 years, all I've generally seen is an upward swing in the market. So I would say buy when you can afford to, when the bank will give you the money, when you can get your, get the finance in order to purchase. There are some good properties to purchase in the eastern suburbs, and buy now while you can. Absolutely.
What sort of property should people be looking at?
Yeah, it's interesting on the budget. I mean, you can purchase a studio in the area and get a good rental return. You can buy a house that's in a good area for families to purchase. But I say buy something that's in your means, and you might not buy something that's perfect. You might buy something that you rent out and live where you want to live, but just get into the market.
And what about if I'm thinking about residential or commercial? Do you have a view there?
Yeah, it's interesting. So residential can be good because you can generally have a tenant, every day of the year, fill vacancies fairly quickly. Commercial can be a bit slower. It's great when you have a commercial tenant, but it can be a slower process to get a commercial tenant. You can have a vacancy period for a long period of time, and there can be landlord contributions to the works. So I would say, if you're in a portfolio of properties, have both. Residential.
Yeah, and while we're on residential, I might bring you in, Shona. You've got a lot of experience, obviously, in property management dynamics. The rental market, last 6 months, the situation we're in now, what are you seeing out there?
Well, 6 months ago, there wasn't much on the market at all in our area, so we're having big queues for people open for inspections, and people were really struggling to find a place. In the last month, because our area is quite seasonal, being by the beaches and things, we're noticing that in the last few weeks a lot more has been coming onto the market. So so it's definitely, we have quite a lot of landlords that are maybe Australian that are moving overseas or whatever, and so they tend to go to Europe in their summer. So obviously that sort of leaves more of a vacancy, or we have a lot of maybe tenants who are from the Northern Hemisphere tend to go back in the winter time. So right at the moment we've got quite a lot more on than we would normally have. So and that's usually what we pre-COVID, definitely we saw that happen. I would say last year it wasn't so big an issue, but this year for some reason, more people have been heading out, so the vacancy is bigger.
So when do they come back?
Usually sort of end of August time, springtime. So
the snow starts to melt in the northern
That's
hemisphere.
right. They want to come back for the sunshine. I mean, we're in an amazing area. We're close to the harbour, close to the beach, close to the city. So the eastern suburbs is probably one of the best places to live, I think. And so people want to come back again for the summertime. So.
So what can landlords in particular do to ensure steady tenancies? Particularly, I mean, obviously, lines of people out the door is obviously good for a landlord, but in those quieter times, what can they do? And how at the moment do rental increases play into that? That's one thing we are seeing a lot of press on.
Sure. So Sorry about that. So landlords should make sure their properties are well maintained. So if you've got a house, make sure the lawn is mown and make sure the painting is sort of up to date, all the repairs are done. They also want to make sure it's reasonably priced in the market as well in comparison to other places. Another thing, those are the two main things. Make sure you've got great advertising for the property, good professional photos, good advertise it everywhere, basically. Domain, realestate.com, Century 21, all the websites, basically. And you need to make sure you've got a good agent for the property as well, who knows what they're doing, of course. That definitely makes a difference. And these are the main things. And with rent increases, so although the rents have been increasing, I guess, right at the moment in wintertime when there's a few more on the market, maybe don't be quite so bullish with your rent increases because, the tenant may move out, and if there's a lot on the market, you might not want to be doing such a big increase in the wintertime. Maybe save it to spring or whatever. So,
And have rents caught up to the declines we saw during COVID? Has that all been recovered now?
I would say that it's recovered and it's probably heading up a little bit further than where it was pre-COVID now. So, it took a little while to get there, but
Excellent. So that's the eastern suburbs. Charles, if I didn't want to invest here, where's a good place to invest in Australia at the moment? In residential, commercial?
Well, if you're talking rental return, the interesting part about that is that the stats are quite extraordinary. Sydney's median rental year to date is $770, Clive. If you go to Perth, it's $659 in Perth. Compared to Sydney, whereas Melbourne is $549, the same as Adelaide. So you've got to look at that and wonder what's going on, because I would think that Adelaide is a great place to invest in. Brisbane is starting to climb too high in pricing compared to Sydney now, but Melbourne and Adelaide are still two of the best to invest in. I get to travel around the country, which I did just recently when we do awards for salespeople and so on, so you get to see all the numbers. And the Perth market itself is probably one of the hottest. And mostly because, and a lot of people don't consider it, but it should be considered because there's a very strong connection between the United Arab Emirates and there's a very strong connection with South Africa for Perth. So there's many, many people migrating into those areas. Tasmania, I would leave because the prices in Tasmania went extraordinarily high and I couldn't see how they could justify it. And of course, they have come back significantly compared to the rest of the country. So for me right now, obviously here in the east, because it's leading the country, 6.8%, as I mentioned before, compared to 6.1. The affordability, if you're an investor, then I would not discount Perth or I would not discount Melbourne and Adelaide at this point in time.
Yeah, while you've got the microphone, and maybe I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up to the room, and I've got some spare questions in case there's a bit of silence. Charles, just give us the outlook for the next 12 months of this market. It's hard to predict exactly where interest rates will go. Don't even think the RBA knows at the moment. But what are we looking 12 to 18 months out?
My concern with the interest rates, Clive, is that they should have already started to look at coming down in June. If you're looking back at the stats last year, unfortunately, every single announcement that's coming out from government at the moment is a handout. I don't know whether you've listened recently, but there are so many handouts. The more handouts, the more spend. The more spend, the more issue and more pressure on inflation, the less opportunity they have to focus on interest rates. And I would suggest to you that there's just as much chance as interest rates going up as they are coming down. It's just like that. And every time I hear about it, and I was listening in Parliament, I don't know why I sat and listened to Parliament because nobody ever answers any questions. And they just said, we're going 300 with this, we're giving 63 tax, and we're going up there, the people are getting 15. And all it was here's some money, here's some money, here's some money, go and spend it. So I think the issue lies with government, and unless something is done to stop, and again, this is not a political statement, it's a statement about the economy. If they don't stop throwing money around, which both do, to get votes, they're going to put us in a position where interest rates will still be on hold or start going up at the end of the year. And that will have a very strong impact, particularly in the suburbs and particularly with the first home buyers who are already under a lot of pressure.
Excellent. Well said. Now, any questions from the floor? Start with a great jumper here. Yep.
Anna, do you want to jump around with the microphone? You're right.
Hello. I've got a question about buyer's guides, and it's probably geared towards the sellers up there. So I guess from my standpoint, as a buyer, I go through realestate.com and Domain, and I have a look at the buyer's guide, and I use that as a gauge as to what property might be within my budget. Right? That all sounds pretty normal. I go to market, I inspect a few properties, I go to auction, and what I'm finding is the sale price, on average, is somewhere between 30%, I might see some nods in the audience, 30% over the buyer's guide, up to like 50% over. So I've wasted, 2 Saturdays going to inspections. I've wasted heaps of time getting finance, getting myself geared up for the auction. In reality, the property's going to go, as I said, well over what the buyer's guide is. So maybe for the sellers out there, can you talk through the other side of it and maybe give me a clue as where they're getting these prices from?
Sorry, what's your name?
Nick.
Hello, Mick. Can I get your email address and phone number? I might be able to find a property for you. I guess if I was selling real estate, I'd be right onto that. I've got to tell you, a year and a bit ago, nobody knew what was going on in the marketplace. And you could put a price guide on, the agents would think that it was right, and then so much money was being thrown around, particularly the year before that with interest rates being so low. Nobody had a clue, not even the agents. Nowadays, it's a massive issue, you're right. And the Department of Fair Trading, if anybody puts a bad review on social media about an agent, once that agent receives 5 bad reviews, the Department of Fair Trading are out there. I can tell you that the Department of Fair Trading, the different name in Queensland, and VCAT in Victoria and New South Wales, they got together recently. And this is a closed door meeting to discuss the underpricing of property. And they have made it they've created it as a big issue that all three are going to focus on. They were targeting one particular agent who's on social media, talking about how many sales that he makes every day, which is quite extraordinary. And so they targeted him because of his social media activity. And I tell all of our principals and franchise owners, for God's sake, stop posting on social media, what colour Ferrari should I buy? Because the ATO are watching you, and so too the Department of Fair Trade. And so they are targeting this particular agent because he's had more than 5 complaints that you're talking about. And I can only say to you that I support what they're doing, and that's not much is going to change at this point in time, but they're getting very, very close. Real estate practitioners, I know this sounds terrible, but in the mainstream, a lot of us don't know what's going to happen because the market is quite unusual. And the other thing is that now with CoreLogic, now with the banks, now with the various institutions out there, you can find out what a property should sell for. It's a lot easier than in my day going back in the 70s and 80s when you go through microfiche at council to see what's sold. You can find it instantly now. And so I can only recommend you do that. And if you find that happening, report the agent, because the more reports they come in, the more they'll work it out, because it's not bad, not a bad way for us to be, it's not a bad way for us to be in this industry when that's happening, when you've got a lot of good agents that are doing the right thing. So sorry, but if I can help you seriously, you just get my details later, and if you see a property you like, text me, and within a minute I'll send you a full report on it, no matter where it is in Australia, and you'll get a full understanding of what it should sell for based on all that data. No charge. Now this is hard for a Lebo to do something for free, let me tell you.
Questions?
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. As an investor with the property in the eastern suburbs, do you think it's better to pay it off quickly, or do you think it's better to save the money and buy another property and not pay it off quickly with the variable loan?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have a lot of clients. I guess in my position, I'd like to purchase multiple properties given the opportunity. And so I would go and buy an investment property, use negative gearing, use the tax advantages to take money out of that property, take the equity out of it and purchase another property. I understand that later on in life it might be difficult to then go and get a loan and take the equity out of that and purchase ongoing ones. So it might be better to pay it off. But I think it depends which stage you are in the buying cycle. But certainly for Shona and I, we would be in a growth stage, so trying to get multiple properties.
Debt is good. If you can get debt right now, it's good. So get as much debt as you can. And variable loans attract tax payments. So if you can stay fixed, it's amazing how something you buy 10 years ago and the loan might be 80% LVR, just let the market take care of that. And when you turn around one day, all of a sudden the loan value ratio is 50% because the market has given you that increase. Reducing debt attracts tax.
Yeah. So just a question. First of all, great speakers and fantastic information. So thank you for that. The other thing is, though, Charles mentioned, he says, look, we've got all these things. People are looking back using figures from the past. And I agree with you. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, we had the Greater Sydney Commission, which is gone. Clive would know all about that as well, obviously. And then we've now got the current government who's come in and they've putting in all these different planning, imposing different planning proposals to councils, and our councils are playing politics amongst one another. Even though something might sound good, they're going to make it, sound bad because the voters. We're in local government elections in less than 3 months to go, so it's a bit of a hodgepodge what's going on. The question is, it's obviously affecting people's perception on where the market is going. So my question to you as well, and of course we've got to take into consideration businesses, and some are, shutting down because people can get things online. People want to work closer to their homes. How do you think that's going to affect us moving forward because of all those things in this area, but also in the neighbouring areas as well?
Let's go backwards just a little bit, because a lot of the governments that are in place now, a lot of the actions they undertake are generally reactive. So we always talk about in my company, make a decision. Is it urgent or is it important? Well, what's the difference? What's important? If you fix that and put that in place, urgent things don't come up. And so the concept of government right now is, we have a problem. So the Queensland government, we need more revenue. If you've got a property in Queensland as an investment and you've got one in New South Wales, we're going to charge you land tax in New South Wales. Like, they come up with the craziest of ideas. And most of the issues are either state or local council. So the state government in Victoria have just announced the fact that if you're buying a property up to 750, I think it is, thousand, it's the first home, no stamp duty. Nil stamp duty, $28,000. You don't have to pay. So I know, but this is what they've announced today, because they think that'll fix the issue we have. But the issue we have started a long time ago. I can categorically say to you that the biggest issue we have that has not been addressed, that they're trying to address today, is local councils. I can tell you of a council not far from here that when a developer lodges a development application, they lodge an application with the Land and Environment Court at the same time because they know they're going to have an issue.
Deed refusal.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I'll tell you another one of my little funny stories because this is how ridiculous it is. I've just carved, I had a block of land that was 10 acres and a block behind it that was 5 acres and 107 acres. They were landlocked. So I approached the neighbour at the front and said, let me buy a driveway. They sold me a driveway and I increased the 5 acres to 10 and I reduced the 107 down to 100, which is a minimum alignment. So it's all done. It's so-called subdivision. There's a beautiful road goes to these two properties. Council would not stamp they wouldn't stamp the approval. They wouldn't do it. I said, what's the problem? They said, you need a gate at the front of the driveway. I said, a gate on the main road? That is a driveway to two houses. Yes, but you need a gate. We won't finalise the approval until you put the gates.
Actually, a different department that approves that as well.
Well, I got the $1,424 gates put up, which you can drive around either side of these gates. I've got a picture. I wish I'd thought about it earlier. I could have shown you the picture. It's the most ridiculous thing. But that is our greatest issue, is our councils. Some of them want development. State government here in New South Wales saying this, the usual not in my backyard's occurring. Something has to happen with local council if we are ever going to meet the challenges of the federal government's housing policy. Was I a bit too political then?
Hillary.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've kind of got a two-part question, and Clive, you might be able to answer the first part. Given the political climate, certain countries are trying to band together and stop using the American dollar. Do you feel that if the American dollar crashed in some way, how that would affect the Australian property market?
Yes.
And the second part of that, related, Charles, would be what insights do you think you could offer in the Australian market in terms of not foreclosure, people not being able to pay off their mortgages and due to mortgage stress or whatever it is?
I could have a crack at the currency one. The US dollar is the global currency. Obviously a massive devaluation of the US dollar would drive up the value of the Australian dollar, make foreign investment more difficult. There's too many factors to take into account to determine what impact that would potentially have on the property market, but just particularly residential, given foreign investment isn't a major factor in that. But maybe in commercial and industrial would have more of an impact. Charles, do you want to tackle the second part? Or Nicholas, do you want to?
Oh, thanks, Nicholas. If you go back to the crash that occurred where mortgages were being sold, so you had A-class, B-class, C-class mortgages in the US, and they were packaging them and selling them, and they were packaging C mortgages into A when they shouldn't have been, and so on. And then you had that massive crash because of that. The property prices in the US dropped significantly. Nothing like that in Australia was felt to the same degree. As for the dollar, I see what you mean. I mean, our dollar would not be worth a lot more than the US, so if you were going to make any money, you'd be taking your properties from here or your cash from here, and you'd be buying over there and waiting. So you'd have a positive impact from that perspective. But when that crash occurred, it only impacted on the Australian market slightly. There were stories there about a strawberry farmer, it wasn't a farmer, a strawberry picker on $27,000 income US annually, that the banks had lent him $960,000 to buy 3 investment properties, and it's any wonder the market crashed. So we are far more regulated, strangely enough, in this country than they are in the US.
Excellent. Well, I might wrap it up so we can have more sandwiches and we can mingle. Look, first of all, thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Shona, for your insights tonight. Thank you to everyone in the audience who came along. It is a cold night, thankfully not wet. Really appreciate you coming and your thoughtful questions as well. Really hope the discussion has been enlightening, has provided you some insights into this market. Please stay, please mingle with the Century 21 crowd and team. If you've got any further questions, please don't hesitate to come up and talk to us. And I'll hand back to Nicholas.
Thank you, Clive, for the expertise and for facilitating this fantastic, informative discussion. Thank you also to all of our sponsors. Thank you to Anna for putting this event together. Thank you to our wonderful team in the office, Charlie, Raymond, Humphrey, everyone else, Monica, everyone that's here, Hillary, Jessica, It takes a whole team, and we've got a solicitor, accountants, everyone here, but it takes a whole team to run this sort of business, and we're so thankful for everyone's support and friendship and guidance throughout this whole process. As we transition from our discussion, I'm thrilled to shift our focus to another important aspect of tonight's event. We're going to hold our charity auction shortly, and we're going to ask the CEO of Ways, Terry Said, to come up here and introduce herself. Ways is an incredible organisation dedicated to assisting young people in need, and we're really pleased to be able to support Ways this evening, and we look forward to introducing you to Terry.
Switch off the microphone. It's a better microphone. Anna, that microphone's better if you don't mind.